Okay, and with that, hello everyone and welcome to Concordia University's fourth space. Thank you for joining us for today's event, Graduate Perspectives, where we will hear from the 2022-2023 public scholars in a fireside chat. To help situate you, we are streaming to YouTube live from fourth space, which is located on unceded Indigenous lands in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. At Fourth Space, we work with our university community to mobilize knowledge by co-creating daily activities to examine research questions and projects in development here at the university. We are running this event as a live stream meeting, so we welcome your comments and questions with a raised hand or via the chat if you're joining by Zoom. For those of you in this space, if you'd like to participate, just let us know by raising a hand and we'll be sure to get a microphone to you. It is now my pleasure to hand it over to public scholar and your moderator today, Andrea Cartile.
Thank you so much, and welcome everyone to our panel of fabulous 2022-2023 public scholars. We are super excited to be here. Yes? Yeah, go team. So we're gonna start off. We're gonna do a roundtable of introductions. I have a couple of questions prepared that we'll be going through for the next hour to hour and a half. And yeah, you get to hear about our perspectives in our graduate school trajectory and our experience as public scholars, and we are super excited. So we'll start off with a quick roundtable of introductions, and just to give you an idea of where we're coming from, what kind of programs we're in, and our research. So my name is Andrea Cartile, and my research focuses, I'm looking at the aircraft design and development process, and I'm creating computer models for this process. So like one of the conversations that's been happening a lot in the media has been about AI. So I am kind of the precursor to AI, where I'm organizing and looking at the different semantics and language that are used in the airplane design process. I'll pass it on to Ari.
My name is Ari, or longer version.
You may need a microphone. There we go.
Aristofanis Soulikias. I'm a PhD student at the individualized program here at Concordia, doing a research creation thesis, which involves film animation and architecture, which are the two fields I've studied and worked with or at in my life. And yeah, that's about it.
My name is Hona Mandafro. I'm an international student from Ethiopia, and my research is about a public housing program in Ethiopia where the government is essentially clearing slums, relocating people to high-rise buildings, and I'm asking how that process of relocation of a massive number of people in a short time period is affecting how the way people relate with their neighbors, their living space, and also the government.
I got a mic. Hi, my name is Scott DeYoung. I'm a third-year communications study PhD candidate here at Concordia. Simply put, my research looks at the relationship between games and disinformation. More broadly, what that means is I'm looking at how games can be tools to both spread disinformation, but also to teach skills like fact-checking and media literacy more broadly. Looking forward to chatting with you all then.
Hi everyone, my name is Arva Hussain. I'm a PhD candidate in the Department of Religions and Cultures. I study the women of my own very small Muslim community and how they experience balancing religion and community.
Hi, nice to meet you all. My name is Vardha Nisar. I am a PhD candidate in the art history department here at Concordia. I am, I think, starting my fifth year. I stopped counting after the third. And my research looks at the intersection of cultural production and military dictatorship back in Pakistan. And yeah, okay.
I must add, because I forgot to say what my research is about. That's how much stress we have. So I'm exploring the built environment as an architect. I'm exploring the built environment through the medium of film animation, and more specifically through the handmade techniques with which I'm specialized in. And I'm trying to draw a connection between the haptic, that is the sense of touch and the feeling and the experiencing through making images, and drawing a parallel with the way we feel and sense the city and the built environment.
That's fantastic. I also forgot to mention I'm a PhD student. So anyway, this is going super well, 10 out of 10. Galia, we can see you on Zoom. Are you able to unmute and can we hear you?
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm Galia. I'm another public scholar from this year, and I'm a PhD student. Also stopped counting after my third year. I like fourth, fifth, like I don't know where I am. I'm doing my PhD in marketing at the John Molson School of Business, and I'm specifically researching the digitization of mental health services. So, our switch from in-person therapy to online therapy. And I'm also I'm looking at the effects of AI on mental health services. So what we see on applications and other stuff that we've been experiencing with the really quick advancements in AI that's been happening recently.
That is fantastic. So as you can see, we have just the most wonderful gang of people here, and we're all doing really cool stuff. And one of the really neat things about our experience this year has been meeting one another, which is something that it's kind of hard to breach those silos, right, of our different disciplines and across faculties. And so we've gotten to hang out and chat, and it's been really cool. So with that, we will go into our first kind of digging into our experiences as graduate students. So the first question I'm going to ask all of us is how to tell us kind of the story of, what did you want to do when you grew up, or when you grow up? I'm still trying to figure that out. And what led you to your current research, to your current field? Was this the plan? Can you tell me a little bit about that trajectory? And if you would like, we can start in reverse order. Galia, can we start with you? Is that okay? Perfect.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. So how old are we saying in terms of like, what did you want to be?
You can start absolutely wherever you want. We can get your whole life story if you'd like.
Cool. So let's say, I guess high school. I was a really big fan of English literature, and I saw myself studying something in that discipline, but I ended up going to business school, and I found that marketing is the closest in terms of creativity in terms to English literature, let's say. And also I was interested in psychology as well. So I felt like in terms of consumer behavior, consumer research, that really worked out for me as my specialization. So I started off with a bachelor's in business, specializing in marketing. And then later on, I went on and kept I was a perpetual student, where now I'm doing my PhD. And in doing my PhD, I didn't specifically know what type of research I was going to go into. But when I first started, I did a course in my master's, actually before my PhD, in qualitative research, and I fell in love with it. And in terms of consumer research and qualitative research, that's something that I really felt aligned with, in something specifically called consumer culture theory. And that's where you study kind of, a consumer lifestyle and how they consume throughout everything they do throughout their life, to put it very, very simply. And so one of the things that I specifically looked at when I was in my master's is actually something really interesting, because as an animal lover, that was something really interesting to me. I looked at animal influencers and animals on social media. And so that's something that we can study in consumer research. And I fell in love with that completely. In my PhD, I continued to I started looking at the digitization of mental health. And this came as an inspiration from, the COVID pandemic and the lockdowns, and how everything became digital in terms of all services, even things that are one-on-one with service providers. And I specifically look at, so that's my context. My context is mental health. And so I forgot the question now, but I guess I'm still talking. And yes, so that's what I'm looking at right now. I don't know if I kind of continued in the line of what I wanted to be as I grew up, but I think I'm kind of staying true to the creativity and the interest in psychology and literature, I guess. I'm not sure, but here we are.
That's fantastic. I still think it's wonderful that you spent your master's looking at cat videos, because that was your actual homework. This is like life goals. This is wonderful.
Totally.
Thank you so much. Would we like to move down the line, or would you like to volunteer?
Huh. Like Galia, I was also thinking, where should I start? When I was a little girl, I wanted to be like my mother. So hashtag every day is a Mother's Day. No, I think I didn't have a very straightforward academic trajectory. Yes, that's the word. But I enrolled in an architectural program. I was there for 7 years. That's a period of my life full of lies and deceit and tears and depression and all of that. I then got somehow involved in museums and art education for children. And that was the phase I was like, oh, nobody's doing this. And I haven't done it. And I never experienced it. And I want to see museums in this way. And I just started a festival back home. And that led to a whole, just looking at museums through a critical lens, that why is it that museums are not this creative space that I've seen elsewhere, and I just want this experience for myself and for other people and kids in my home country. So that's how it started. I then got married. I was bored out of my mind in that city, and then I focused all my anger on this one monument, and literally that's where the thesis comes from, my anger. It was a national monument. It's part of my thesis. I look at it, I study at it, I completely destroy it in my analysis. So yes, hasn't been a straightforward thing. It's not what I wanted to do, but I love what I'm doing now. I think somehow the dots have come together, and the different things I've done come together. Yeah, so I am where I am, and I'm not religious. So yeah.
That's wonderful. I've never mentioned like vengeance as a motivator for research,
it's really good.
but I think it's a really good one. Anger and just like general frustration, excellent motivator.
Hi. So I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be a librarian. I wanted to be a baker. Yeah, like everybody says, finishing your PhD and opening a bakery, or even before. Anyways, so I initially went into history because that was the only thing that interested me in the lineup of things. And I had gone into it with the plan of, like, I'll switch majors, right? First year, I didn't. Second year, my professor wouldn't let me. Third year, I was like, okay, not too bad. And then I ended up doing my master's in it, in South Asian history, which I never wanted to study, but yeah. And then what I really wanted to do was, I wanted to tell people about my community, right? And when I went online, I went into books and nobody knew about us. And always the question, like, looking at me would be, who are you? Like, what kind of Muslim are you? So that was just my intention with this PhD, of like telling people about my community, its women. And that's how I came. And then, yeah, I wanted to study anywhere out of Pakistan. So that was like how I ended up here at Concordia. And now I've realized I really just like being a public speaker. Like, I like being famous, right? So yeah, hopefully let's see where that takes me in the next few years.
Yeah, everyone should follow Arwa on Instagram, because she posts all of this food, and it is the best thing that I've ever viewed. It's wonderful. I live vicariously through you on a daily basis. Thank you for your contributions. Scott.
I just want to add, based off what you were saying, that I think like the trajectory of pursuing things that you're like, I never want to study that, has also kind of been a thing that I've explored, where I think the reason sometimes I don't want to study something is because I know that there's a challenge there, and I'm just like, I don't want to engage in that challenge. But then once you do, you're like, the reason that challenge was there was because I was so like weirdly enamored by it in a way that I didn't want to engage in it. And so I found that for my own trajectory as well. But short answer is I wanted to be a firefighter, but that's when I was quite young. And since then, you do the thing where in high school, they're like, you need to choose your future, and you're like 17 and you're like, I don't know. But it's always for me been, I wanted to do a job where I felt like I could work with people, and I felt that I could be doing something that I knew would make a difference in their lives. And so out of high school, that turned into going into teachers college. and spending time as a primary to grade 6 teacher, working with young children, typically in schools that were lower socioeconomic places. And in that time, I realized that a lot of learning for kids isn't happening so much in the classrooms anymore as it is happening in their home life and in their online life, whether it's through their parents' socials or through their own. And I was like, oh, this is really interesting. I'm like bound to the walls of my classroom. Can I study that? And so I pursued a master's that kind of looked at how can we talk about digital issues in ways that are engaging, and I built an escape room that talked about filter bubbles and echo chambers. And in that process, I was like, okay, so games are like maybe a really interesting space to look into. And I was like, what are other major issues that I'm kind of coming across? And for me, that's when disinformation was unavoidable to notice. And so I pursued a PhD kind of expanding on what I was doing in the master's and looking at kind of disinformation through the lens of games and what that means, and looking at ways that we can talk about these issues where people can play with them and interact with them and make them tangible. And so, I created a board game in that process, and now I'm still studying that in the PhD. And so for me, well, the journey, if I was like, I want to be a firefighter, then a teacher, then I was making escape rooms, and now I study disinformation, like that doesn't seem to connect. But when you actually lay it out as like the dots and the reasoning behind them, it's been a journey of like finding ways that we can make really complex things tangible to people and make things that people can feel in their lives be understood. And so, yeah, that's kind of how my journey brought me here. And I'm curious for what's in store because there are still some things I don't want to do. And I have a feeling I'm going to have to end up doing them, like statistics, any day now. Here you go.
Yeah, if you expose yourself to statistics, it's a little like Stockholm syndrome with statistics. That's how it works. So
I've been doing it a little bit.
Yeah. And it's really cool because some of the work you've done this year has been like you're revisiting the kids aspect, right? So you're doing like games for kids, and you're still engaging throughout that trajectory. So that's fascinating. Thank you so much. Hone.
So I think like everybody else, what I wanted, I've shifted as we grow, and that's probably the case for most people. But there's also a trajectory, a line that connects all those aspirations. So when I was a kid, my dad would wake me up in the morning to write a letter complaining about the local administration to higher officials. So I wanted to be a local administrator and just avoid the scenario of a young kid being, taken out of bed, write a letter complaining about malgovernance and all that. So that when I grow up, kind of, okay, I see actually the cause of those problems is wider than the person at the local level. I have to look at into the national level politics. And then when I grow up, I saw that actually, a lot of these countries are poor for a relationship that's beyond, politics, and there's an exploitative relationship between global north and global south. So every time I realized this, I was following what can I do? As an undergrad, I knew I want to be a social science just because, governance is very much aligned with that. So I didn't go into natural science. Once I joined social science in high school, that's where you choose your major in Ethiopia. I wanted sociology, partly because a number of people before me were selling it as this cool discipline that you can get a good job, but also you can study society and why problems are happening and all that. So I majored in sociology, but then I realized it was too theoretical, at least in the version I went through. So I switched into doing a master's in social work, hoping that there will be some practical skills. But then I realized I'm not a person who kind of can be, for instance, a counselor or psychologist. I'm not skilled in that kind of relationship, but more at the national level, political kind of advocacy. So I went to do another development studies master's in Netherlands. And then I went back to Ethiopia where I was teaching and got busy doing a number of things I wanted to do in life. But at some point I felt like I'm burned out. I need a break. And I was looking out for a fellowship outside Ethiopia to take a break, to take stock of what I've done and what my future would be. So I randomly found out about a fellowship that McGill and Foundation Jansove here offer for young leaders. So I joined there, stayed 1 year and I mentioned just 2 blocks away from here, which gave me an opportunity to audit courses at Concordia. Loved Concordia. I had an opportunity offer from other universities, but I fall in love with Montreal and Concordia, and I stayed at Concordia, and I chose my program, which is social and cultural analysis, because it kind of gives you an opportunity to explore a meaning and different facets of social justice. So I guess now in retrospect, what anchors all this is a desire to promote social justice and do something to address injustice. Long answer, but I guess that's how I ended up at Concordia, I guess.
That's wonderful, and I am so pleased at how honestly you come by this work, from writing letters to administration with your father. That's a very, this is a wonderful connection. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, that encourages me to tell some of my story, which I thought was too long. Yeah, when I graduated from McGill University, having a bachelor's in architecture, I never thought I was gonna go do a PhD. Well, one reason being that I had spent 5 years not sleeping and doing these crazy projects at McGill. But looking back, and also because I never thought I was going to teach or research, but looking back, the very choice of going to McGill to do architecture was because I didn't know what to do with my life, and architecture was one of those fields where, well, at least that's the promise I got when I attended this professional orientation at CEGEP, that if you study architecture, you can do anything else. So I thought, okay, well, that's for me, because I'm not ready yet, and I knew that I could combine some of my artistic, let's say, skills and interests, and the fact that I was okay with math. But I guess all of us here love a lot of things, and this is why I like this group, and I also love too many things, and I think I was never quite happy ever since I graduated from architecture. So I have, my life is a constant search for trying to combine as many of the things that I have in me or can express. And sometimes I would find something, for example, in Greece, where I found a job in conservation of historic buildings, which was specialized in medieval buildings across the country. I mean, that was amazing, which satisfied my interest in history and culture. But at the same time, I wasn't as creative. And I would end up in all these dead ends. And somehow the architecture office wasn't quite what I thought it was going to be, both in terms of its routine and its creative process, for me at least. And because I never really wanted to specialize too much in anything, at least the things that I was trying to do. So finding out the evolution of, let's say, window shutters of northwestern Greece during the late 1600s was not really what I wanted to know.
Really?
Yeah. So so finally, skipping a few years, but the only thing I could do with all this was a master's in conservation. But I did it to somehow see if other doors would open. And I ended up in the UK, and I ended up in architecture offices. And again, I found another job which was opening an opportunity in, well, I'll say it, at the Princess, well, now the King Foundation for the Built Environment in London. That's one of the charities, which was more geared towards urbanism and sustainable urbanism, and specifically. And I thought that would be an opportunity to deviate and do something and try something else. And again, I would end up in these architectural offices where you sit in front of a computer drawing straight lines, and also economic crises and job opportunities were never easy. So I decided to, and now I'm going to tell you my childhood dream was to do film animation. What better place than come back to Montreal at Concordia, where I always eyed this program, which was very artistic based, auteur based, and I was in love with the processes I discovered and the whole environment, and I ended up doing a documentary which combined architecture and animation. And I think, again, to skip a few years again, bringing all these things together was, and also discovering in the meanwhile that I did like teaching as well, because I started teaching Greek, modern Greek, and I kind of felt more comfortable with teaching, and I decided to bring it all together and do something that combined all of the things I loved, as many as I could: film animation, architecture, and why not history and conservation, because I'm talking about stories of cities.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna pass this back this way. There we are. That's super interesting that you have actually come back to your childhood dream. That's really exciting. And I wanted to be a vet. That was my original plan. I studied biology, and then at the end of biology, I thought, I do not want to be a vet. So then I chose the my worst subjects for math and physics. And so then I was like, okay, what's the hardest thing that I can do as a second degree? And then I was like, oh yeah, mechanical engineering sounds absolutely like the worst idea I could possibly have. And so now I'm at a PhD, which is very surprising and a lot of fun in airplanes, because they fly with magic. And I'm still trying to figure out how exactly that magic works. It's very interesting, very cool machinery. And yeah, this has been a really interesting insight into different trajectories. And I think I like the pressure we put on, especially, people around high school age, even younger, is to, you must know what you want to do with your life. And it turns out that actually it's very winding, and you don't have to decide right away, and you can do all sorts of stuff. The world is kind of our oyster, which is really kind of a positive perspective. It's a lot more hopeful than we're led to believe, which is good. We will move on to our second question. So here I will I will ask everyone to answer just as you'd like. And so I'd like to know a little bit about some of the really cool opportunities that you've had throughout this, in your graduate studies specifically, but really throughout your academic career. And I'd like if we could highlight some of the things that you don't think would be possible in any other type of platform. So what unique positive opportunities have you had in your studies? I don't know if anyone would like to kick us off. I'm looking around. There we go.
I'll grab the mic. I feel like the easiest answer is the Public Scholars Program. I mean, right, we're all here, plus people from the program are in the audience, so you have to say that one. But no, it has been an interesting highlight. But to kind of go over the whole holistic kind of grad and the opportunities that I've had, I always tell people that while I'm very lucky and blessed to have gotten a lot of these opportunities, my number one strategy for gaining opportunities is to just send the email. I remember when I was an undergrad and I was like, this prof did a cool lecture, maybe I need a job, maybe he has money. And I emailed him just being like, I liked your lecture, are you looking for students? And he was like, I just got a grant last week. And I was just like, timing, right? So for me, opportunities are great, but there's so many. And so if you have the bandwidth to just send the email, you never know what can happen. But since then, I would say that I've been in a very unique position where the work that I do is non-traditional to, I think, the academic context, right? I mentioned before I made an escape room. Last year, I made a board game, all within the university context, to have them out there. And I've talked to students from U of T, and I'm like, yeah, so my research, I live stream game analysis, and then I make board games that I implement into different game spaces and have people, and they looked at me and they're like, yeah, that would never get through my committee because it's not hard, rigid academic processes. And so for me, like even my own research in this space as a creative research individual is an opportunity that I find very unique. Like when I go to conferences and I get to talk about my work, when I go and meet other grad students, I get to talk about the stuff that I'm doing. And when I talk with people in the industry that like I'm making games and I'm making tools, those are like my practice is like a very unique opportunity. But beyond that, in relationship to that, it has opened up doors. So I was just mentioning, like I got to go to Sicily a few months ago and work with the Canadian Military College to talk about, what does media literacy look like in Canada and beyond. And I've had chances to do that in other spaces, partially due to, the publicness of the Public Scholar program, but also just into the nature of the work that I do is very like hands-on and material. In my master's, which is a bit harder, I think, to find those opportunities than it is perhaps in a PhD program, one of those was working with professors to put on events. So actually in the fourth space where we are, one of the escape rooms that I built was actually in this space for about 2 weeks. And that was because I had a prof who was willing to meet with the fourth space and help set that up. And so for me, like, that's kind of, I guess, both my advice and my opportunities mixed together. Does anybody want to add on? I don't want to steal the mic.
I think one of the most wonderful opportunities that I got, and yes, it is part of the Public Scholar, the Spotlight event that I was able to do with South Asian scholars. And in a way, being in this setting and context has allowed me to challenge some of the academic biases that exist. For example, far too often South Asia equals India, or South Asia equals one particular issue. And I've been able to challenge that in my research and through those talks. So that has been a wonderful opportunity to have, to kind of push back against it and foreground other ideas. I do not think I would have been able to do it successfully from the outside or this early on in my life, maybe when I was much older, and then somebody would have taken me seriously, but it kind of allowed me to do that, and I'm very, very grateful for that particular opportunity.
So I'll go ahead. For me, doing this research has been transformative. Like, I am one of the only people doing research on this particular topic, right? So not only does that get me a lot of, interest from senior scholars who know about this community, but not necessarily know anything in depth about it, but from within my own community, at this, I would say a very young age, I'm getting a position of respect where I'm getting calls to do consultations, right? This wouldn't have been possible, I don't think, for me in any other field. And then another thing I want to highlight is being at Concordia in the religions department, and my graduate experience has been very transformative from what it was before. So kind of just to give you a bit of a context, I had my second kid 10 days before I was to start my first class. And before this, like in very different contexts, I've gotten a lot of judgment. I've gotten a lot of doubts, but it was my department, my supervisor, everyone in religions who was like, you're not the first one. You won't be the last one. You'll get there. We've all done this. And the support they've given me over these 5 years has been transformational and has enabled me to stay in this program, honestly. I have faced a lot of judgment, even I've gotten the statement, oh, no, she's done for. So that context has been what has made my graduate journey so different. I don't think I would have gotten that support in a workplace. I don't think I've gotten that support anywhere else. So that's been a very positive experience of this.
That's like a mic drop moment. It's incredible.
Yeah, I think I can follow up to that, because for me also, I don't think ever in my life that I've been employed by people who believe in me, support me, and also allow me to do the things I love. So I cannot ask for anything more. All I have to do is, deliver from my end. Now, now, if you're looking at the library and you're trying to find books on animation and architecture, or movies and cities, it's probably lying somewhere in my living room among many stacks of piles of books, which are overwhelming. But at the same time, these books, I mean, you can indulge in them as well, and I love all of the readings that I'm having, and I could have been reading these books as a hobby or as a bedtime, activity, which that's the danger, because you can somehow let loose and just read without taking notes. But all this to say that the interdisciplinarity in practice, and the way that finally the artistic practice is grounded in some theoretical axes, is something that is revelatory, because you may become a bit arrogant or a little too self-confident, which is great, but it has its limitations when you are creating and you're doing your artwork and you kind of live in that bubble. But then in the PhD program, by opening up these doors in all of this discourse that has happened before you thought you had discovered the wheel, is revelatory. It's intimidating, but at this, in there you may lose your innocence a little bit, and maybe that it might pollute, let's say, your artistic practice. But at the same time, I think eventually what you do is more critical and deeper. And the other great thing is the communities that you reach through your work. I mean, this is true for an artist, but as a scholar, finding other scholars in conferences. I've traveled and I've done even an exchange in Lisbon, which was quite an important part of my PhD. And I will end with my highlight, which was winning the Jorisch Family Award, where I spent a month overlooking Salzburg from a tower. So I don't know if any other program would allow you to do that. So that's the one cool thing, if any, and of course the Public Scholars Program.
Yeah, that's wonderful. We'll go to Hone and then Galia. I haven't forgotten you.
I think one of the good things about studying at Concordia for me has been, as someone who is really very much invested in Ethiopia's ongoing affairs, it's always, a challenge to be tuned to what's happening elsewhere. And being present in this space was a reminder, actually, one, things are interconnected. What's happening in Ethiopia is not a secular, it's an isolated incident. It has to have somehow relation with something else. So that has led into, me thinking about, at a scale broader than Ethiopia. And that I find it academically productive, intellectually stimulating, but also in terms of network, because it has led into me meeting a number of people. So that's one. And of course, being part of, from the region and studying here, I have led into taking responsibilities such as organizing Miguel Concordia Conference on African Studies, that brought people from different continents, and several of them were also speakers in my public scholar, at least a few of them. So it shows you how I was given the opportunity to connect with people that are really helping me articulate my own research, but also just generally supporting my academic goals. The other challenge, I think, in this public scholar program is, again, going back to the idea of like, staying within particular, limited Ethiopian audience. The challenge in the public scholar was you gotta broaden your appeal to non-Ethiopians, to others, to people in the north. So it has led me to ask questions like, why this matters for the people in Montreal, where I'm physically located. I don't think I would have asked that question if I've done it elsewhere, even in Europe, where I did my master's, because there's so much normalization of thinking about Africa in a way that is intended to serve at least academic output African countries. Here, you have to really link it to an audience and a student body that's not necessarily very familiar to the African context, and that has led me to really think and grow differently. So I guess at a broader, partly abstract level of opportunities, I think that has been the most helpful kind of opportunity I got by studying at Concordia.
That's wonderful. Yes, it really enables us to kind of bridge the gap between things that would not normally have, we wouldn't have had the opportunity to connect, or people we wouldn't have the opportunity to connect with. Galia, would you like to answer?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess my focus will be on something else, because we spoke a lot about, the public scholar opportunities that we received throughout our tenure. I guess for me, being a PhD student really started on the right foot when I met my supervisor. I think it's really important, to have a very good relationship, which I think we're all familiar with this as PhD students. You have to have a very good relationship and a very positive, supportive kind of, let's call it a vibe, but like, with your supervisor, because it all kind of relies on that. Eventually it becomes like a collegial relationship in terms of scholarship, because you're going to be writing with your supervisor, you're going to be researching with them. Whatever it is that you cook up together for your dissertation, that could become a publication later on. And that's what happened for my master's. So, and kind of to piggyback a little bit off of what Scott said about, going into something that you truly care about. It just in general, when I met my supervisor for my PhD, her name is Professor Zainab Arsal. I met her when I was doing my master's at Concordia. And so when we decided to kind of together on what the dissertation topic will be about, it was something that I was a phenomenon that I was already engaging in person as a consumer. So I had created an account for my cat on Instagram, and I was already using it and kind of engaging in that whole situation. And she told me that could easily be a dissertation topic, because it is something that we are consuming. It's a digital object. It's a digital network that everyone is kind of a part of, and it has to do a lot with the interspecies relationships that we form with our pets. So it's definitely something to research. And now it's actually, a paper that's an R&R right now. So we are in the midst of publishing, hopefully ultimately publishing if we can. So we're revising it right now, and we're going to be resubmitting it. So this is something that has happened not only because, it's something that I was interested in to begin with, but also I have such a positive relationship with my supervisor, and we became, co-authors and friends as well. So it's really important to have really positive relationships with the people around you and connect with the right people. So if you are deciding on going to grad school, you really need to know who you're, interacting with and who you're going to become linked with within your scholarly, endeavors and what you're going to do. So yeah, that's something that I thought might be interesting to think about as an opportunity. An opportunity is meeting the right people and knowing who you're connecting with.
That's wonderful observations, and it's really true. We're the opportunities we receive are the people who facilitate our opportunities are key, right? Like that's who recognizes that something has the potential to be a research topic, or has the potential to, or people take interest in what you're already interested in, and that kind of support is, I think, kind of unique to this particular academic platform, as well as the thing I've appreciated most has been the opportunity to cross sectors and cross disciplines from a place of interest and curiosity. So in my work, I've been able to work with government and with academia and with industry and just different places and different audiences, which I think has been so cool and such a unique place to do that, and from a perspective of just interest and to try and help people who are in this industry. So I think it's really exciting. I'll just move this over so you can hear me a little bit better. Sorry, there we go. Super, thank you so much, everyone. Hold on, my laptop is taking a nap. There we are. So we'll move on to our next subject, which is challenges. So challenges of graduate school in particular, and within the Canadian context. So this is not like, it's not Concordia specifics, it's not any university specific, but I'd like to hear some of the things that you've found challenging as graduate students and some of the things you wish would be better supported from a Canadian or Canada-wide perspective, I should say, at like federal level, as well as provincial, I suppose, but mostly because we're in the university context, it would be federal. Would anybody like to start?
Funding. Give us money, all the money possibly. No, but like, so challenges, one of the biggest thing has obviously been, managing funding, finding ways of, going through this without having to, go insane working a full-time job, which many people have to do also, which I admire, by the way. And so no more help when you were initially coming in, having those kind of supports in place. And for me, like, the first 2 semesters, I had Concordia funding, but it wasn't enough, obviously. And then I got the FRQ, but it took some time. And for others, it takes even longer than 1 year. It takes up to 2 years. And challenges, I had another one in mind, which I've apparently forgotten now.
It's okay, I can piggyback off of that as well. So the funding, I agree, is a huge issue. And I think it needs to be federally regulated because right now, graduate students, we don't have any rights really as employees, or as we kind of fall in this weird gap. And it's not standardized across the country, across departments, across faculties. Like there is no standardization for making a living and for being able to produce the research. And every time we ask graduate students to take on other part-time jobs, yes, it does. I mean, we learn stuff usually when we gain experience, but it detracts from the research. So every time we take a contract, it means less hours towards publications. So if we want to be a strong research country, which I believe is, within the interests, we need to support our grad students better, 100%.
Yeah, and so I also remembered, which is kind of linked to that, is as an international student, one of my biggest challenges has been the visa processes. Oh my goodness, so much. I think I can say confidently at this point that everything that could happen with the visa process going wrong has always happened to me in these last 5 years. I've had delays. I've had to run back home, cutting short a visit. I've had tears, blood, sweat, everything in filling out visa applications, not only for myself, but for the rest of my family too. Forms and forms and forms and forms. And even then, you're still left waiting every few years on a very precarious status that you have to be very mindful of all the time. You have to keep constant track of when those are expiring, when you need to renew. God forbid you're late. Funding is tied to our visa processes. At the end of our programs, we don't know what is going to happen to us. We've been living in this country for 4 or 5 years at this point, and we don't know what's going to happen to us after that. So all of that is very, very scary and very, very hard to deal with when you need to be focusing on research. So that's something that's the reality for all of us as international students living here every day.
I guess I can follow up on that because it's a point stressing again. International students, obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty involved in coming to a new country that you have no support system, and therefore you would like to see the university step up the support, both in terms of finance. And I think in terms of finance, there's something that I am struggling to understand. A number of funding opportunities are there when you start the program, but not when you are about to finish. And it's like when you are about to finish, you want to really focus. And that's where I think, university should support. I mean, there are, in our department at least, there is a GPD kind of created funding called dissertation writing, but it's just 5K, and it's, I think, a department specific thing. But I think it's worth thinking at the governmental level, but also at the university level, what are the funding mechanisms available for students that are about to finish? I think that needs to be taught. I mean, at the beginning, I'm one of the lucky folks who had really good funding. I had the Vani scholarship. I had the anthropology grant, specific foundation grant from Winter Green Foundation in New York. So, but all of them I could only apply at the beginning. Not if I had waited, I wouldn't have got them. So I think the funding wise, yes, the payment, I don't think it's competitive. I haven't seen the statistics, but Canada sells, itself as competing with other countries to attract best minds. I don't think it's the fellowships universities offer are competitive with other countries, and I think that needs to be increased. And obviously, the years need to be taught. And the part of this is because the PhD program model here requires at least the first 2 years of doing coursework, which is not the case in a number of countries. So, which means you have to spend a number of longer in the program, and yet there's an assumption like it can be done in 4 or 5 years, which I don't think is practical for most students. So funding, especially towards the end. I guess the other element is teaching assistantship, research assistantship. We have to do those because they are partly training, but I think we should not do them too often to take away time from our own project. And in terms of, I think, particular context, maybe there's a need to cater for student needs coming from particular countries where right now Sudan is in a civil war, and Sudanese students are stuck. There's a war in Ukraine. Ethiopia has been going through war for 2 years. I think there's a need also for specific support system when this country with the situation is developed, because as I said, as students who don't have that much of support system, you don't prepare for this. And I think universities should plan for contingencies such as this. And I know this is more of a wish list, but I think with a resource and the policy the Canadian government and universities sell, I think it's doable, and it would be to the advantage of everyone to do this.
I don't think anybody prepares you for how alienating your own context becomes for you when you're in a foreign university or when you're outside of your own home country. I did not realize how many times I would have to explain what Pakistan is, how Pakistan works, what those things are. And those become more apparent when you're doing, for example, your ethics clearance, when you're writing a paper, or when you're writing or talking about, you have to spend so much time explaining your context constantly. So I will always have at least 2 pages just explaining the history of Pakistan, right? And that takes so much time away from everything else. And I think that has more to do with the lack of diversity in terms of faculty, in terms of having more opportunities for people from places that are not, that are marginalized, or that, yeah, so just we have to make spaces for other kind of ideas. When we talk about decolonizing museum, every single time it is seen from a European context, and I have to come and disrupt it and like, no, this is also, there are these ways of doing this. And that's a very hard position to be in constantly, because after a certain time, it's just like, yeah, that's, you know, you're always just saying that. But yeah, because I have to, I need to, but nobody prepares you for that. And that's a tough part of being in a graduate setting where there's very little awareness about who you are and where you're from. Yeah.
I can jump in here. I want to thank you for the question, because after the previous one, I was like, I hope we're not painting universities and academia as like the perfect utopia, because there are real problems there. And I always like to break down the challenges when I'm talking to incoming grad students or just colleagues into kind of three categories. So like one is like support, and we've mentioned kind of the financial side, but also the level of like, do you have a social life, both where you can be a researcher, like talking with other researchers, but also where your life just isn't your research, where you can take a break. As someone who studies this information, I need to be able to not look at a screen that's full of hate and problematic content, right? And so do you kind of have that support? And then there's challenges with that, right? Where I'm very lucky that I have research labs that I can go to, but a lot of grad students don't, and a lot of grad students get really isolated. And so my biggest suggestion for incoming grad students is like, build yourself a support network. Find friends, make a monthly reading club, have like a monthly book club, try what you can to do, but it's really, really hard because there's not a lot of institutional support behind those things. And with how much other stuff people have going on, it's really hard to make that stuff happen. So that's one. The other one is expectations. And that applies to your own research, but also from like communities around us. So I've had professors tell me, oh, you should stop taking jobs, you should stop working. And then the next week they offer me a job. And I'm like, okay, so do you want me to not work or do you want me to work, right? Like, which one do you want it to be? And obviously I have my own expectations in addition to that. But then you also have like, I've talked to like tenure profs who are like, okay, well, you know, when I was a grad student, I just closed the office door and wore my pajamas all day and then wrote, and I was done in 3 years. And I was like, okay, but like you had a full funding package where you could do that, right? Like your expectations for like how I'm supposed to work don't really apply. Or like and then the last one, which just kind of bleeds into, is like the future, where I've also had people be like, well, you don't need to be writing journal articles, you don't need to be writing book chapters, you don't need to be going to conferences, because that's not what you had to do in academia 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. But today you do, right? Like today it's a very competitive job market. And for us, we have to be thinking about our futures outside of it. Yes, I get to make games and study games and do great things that I love and do, but if I'm not thinking about where I'm going to end up after that, then I'm going to be behind when I actually graduate, which means I have all these other kind of labors that I'm not getting paid for, I'm not getting covered for, that might not even pay off. Like I don't know what conferences are actually worth going to compared to other conferences, because I don't know which ones are the ones that are going to matter when I apply for a job in the future, right? And so those are kind of like the broad way that I frame those challenges. And they're not specific to any university, they're specific to academia as a whole. And I feel like there are some disciplines and some departments that have been able to build like support structures, or some professors, as Galia mentioned, like where you can have really great professors that can bring you in and kind of give you that guidance of like, don't apply there, but apply there, right? But there's not mainstream norms around this. And if I feel like one of the biggest challenges I have is actually that future piece, where I think academia puts a lot of pressure on us as grad students to have a really big CV. And if everyone's pressured to have a really big CV, it only makes the CVs get bigger and bigger and bigger, because those are the ones that always keep applying. And so if there's kind of a change in terms of how our CVs have to look post-grad, then maybe there's a world where we don't have to be constantly outputting pieces like that. But to me, that's quite an idealist and utopic sentence. But those are the kind of the three ways that I frame those challenges. And it's important to be aware of them when you come in, because if you don't think about the future while you're in the present, you're going to be potentially sad one day.
Yeah, and even talking about like a lot of the time, the assumption is that you will continue along an academic path, which is, and then other jobs are called alternative, which is very strange, because I don't know what the statistics are, but I'm guessing that only a very small percentage of PhD students end up in a research academic path. So really, the academia is the alternate, it's the exception to the rule. So then where else, the PhD is a great conduit for a lot of opportunities, but we have permission to broaden our expectations of where we can end up afterwards, which is cool, but also not often, sometimes not mentioned. Anyone else would like to speak?
I guess, yeah, Scott made me realize that I'm in trouble.
It could just be my discipline.
Or you highlighted something that I want to keep under the carpet, which is what happens next. I don't want to know. Well, there was this promise that doors will open. I don't know which doors will open, but everybody's saying, no, you're doing a PhD, doors will open. So I'm here and I'm hoping that some doors will open. And I'm, as you can see, I'm a pretty flexible person. I can, I can do things and I could accept eventualities. But there's this challenge of marrying the things that you love, or because here we all do things that we love, and I don't think we got into the PhD through purely utilitarian motives. I think purely, I say. So there's always this challenge of concretizing these very lofty or ethereal ideas, especially in the social sciences or in the arts, where a big component of what I do, for example, is quite philosophical, and it's not easy to see it as a specific profession. So that is a challenge. But again, I think there's some kind of excitement when things are fluid and open and possible. So I want to be optimistic. The issue of, so most other scholars have covered me, especially with the financial problem, and I do admire very much the international students who go through an extra layer of challenges that people who are from here don't. Still, so I did get the shirk, for example, but I got it in my third year, which meant that I can only have 2 years of shirk. And I'm not sure quite why this is, because
shirk is funding, just so everybody,
sorry,
our audience knows.
Yes, please, yeah.
One of our big tri-council fundings.
Yeah. So, and as Hone was saying, towards the end, things become even more demanding, and that's where we need the help. So, and again, then that brings us to a certain dependency on research assistantships or other work that we get through the university. And if we're lucky enough, that work may overlap with our own thesis or research. In my case, I think I am quite lucky, but still, even in that case, even if it's a few degrees away from your focus, you still have to, it is a challenge to put it together. And then the other challenge, which I think you all probably have, especially if we're doing individualized work, is structuring our time. If we're used to 9-to-5 jobs or other studies that involved a lot of classes and homework and shorter deadlines, being able to self-discipline, to be productive, to be motivated. Isolation also brings down motivation. So things like what we're doing now is good, or the public scholars program, or generally reaching out to the public and having that feedback and seeing that the work that we do is relevant to society. I know some people might say, well, you're doing it for yourself and maybe some other researcher will pick it up later and it will contribute to society one way or the other. But it's very important. I mean, for me, it was very important. And I think that's another challenge that what I do is not only relevant to me, that there's this so what question, and it has to be answered, and that's another struggle. So and yeah, and then when we deal with projects that are very mentally demanding, where you have to go deep, you have to read a lot of books, you have to remember what you read, and there are more than one, maybe two or three. Switching from one to the other requires enormous amount of energy, at least for me. So the time and the energy I spend switching from one project to the other, because yes, I had to dive into this one, but now I have a meeting for another project, and I have to leave this aside and try to do this, and it's a lot of energy. So managing this, and maybe as a solution or as an advice, is when one starts the PhD, is to somehow set, I know it's not easier said than done, but somehow set the red lines, or some kind of rules where you can say no to certain things, or maybe make sure that that work that you have committed yourself to do can be given for in other words, have longer periods of time per work than having short snippets and bites. Did I say everything I had in my frustration list? I think
Sure, it's
so far
infinite.
so good. Yeah.
The structuring piece is very, very challenging, just in general. I don't know if everyone finds the same, but from the feedback I've received from grad students over the years, it's if you already have this skill set of structuring yourself, you are probably way ahead of me anyway. Hone and Galia, would you like to add?
I guess my addition is something other than what's already been said. It's something we talked about in some of our workshops for Public Scholar, and that's we talked about imposter syndrome and how we don't, it's difficult to believe that, as a researcher, you feel that you still have not, become an expert at whatever it is you're researching, because you still have yet to publish or have yet to collect all your data. But in reality, we've read a lot of work on what we're looking at. We've done a lot of secondary research, given what we're doing. Even if you haven't collected the data, you already do have a bank of knowledge on whatever it is that you're researching. And so it's something that it is a challenge for us to believe that we are experts, and we might not be exactly where we want to be in terms of that expertise, but we are building towards it. And what our knowledge is right now is actually a lot more than your average Joe who doesn't know much about your topic. So it is okay, and it is safe to step out and say, yes, I am actually an expert on what I'm researching, and putting your voice out there. And this is something that we talked about in a lot of our workshops for the Public Scholar, because as public scholars, we did have to step up and say, yes, we are experts in this, and this is what I have to say about it. And it's really kind of uncomfortable for someone who doesn't feel that way to kind of put together, bring together the cognitive dissonance of like your actions with how you're feeling, in order to step up and be that expert. And we've done so in a lot of our, publications in, newspapers like The Conversation and like, the Montreal Gazette. So we've done a lot of that, even in our spotlight events and the 3MT and all of the things that we were required to kind of be a part of for the tenure of the Public Scholar. So we really had to kind of overcome that challenge of imposter syndrome. And for us as PhDs, if we go into an academic career and we want to teach, that's also another little hurdle that we have to step over, because you're standing in front of a room of students who might not be that far away of you in terms of their degrees, and you're teaching something, and it's intimidating to be the expert in the room when really, you're just not that far away from their degree, but you are teaching them something that you've been taught and you feel comfortable enough to teach, but not yet an expert. So it's very interesting to go to like maneuver that in grad school, because at John Molson we get to teach intro to marketing, and sometimes you really need to kind of convince yourself that you are truly, you have the competence to do that. And so it was an interesting experience for me, and it continues to be, because imposter syndrome is ever haunting. And so that is something that I've definitely struggled with, and I think grad students generally have that as a challenge that they need to overcome.
Absolutely, it's a wonderful point, and it's also reflective of giving ourselves grace as we become experts, right? It's okay to no one should know everything, and it's really important to acknowledge that we're all just human, and then we're at the beginning as well of our research and our expertise, and expertise is something that you should be developing over a lifetime. So. Oh, excuse me. Oh, getting so emotional now. Kidding. That's wonderful. And then in terms of imposter syndrome too, I always dislike that word because it implies that it's a problem with the individual, whereas really it's kind of our systems that we have in place that are designed in such a way that we feel incompetent, or other people that make us feel this kind of, that we don't, sense of belonging that's not quite there. So I think it's really an institutional problem and not a personal problem, and we will fight. Okay, go team. Onet, would you like to add?
I think both of you said, but part of the reason why I feel like that imposter syndrome seems to me, we only see the final output, not the process. I think I read professors' publications, and I'm reading it to cite it, and then I think like, wow, this is good. How can I get mine closer to this? And that kind of feeds back into the idea of like, I'm not good enough. I cannot write that well, especially if you are like not a native speaker like me. That builds up. I think so. Maybe it goes to the point I think Scott was making about support system, having someone that can see your not ready draft to review and give you the boost you need, both in terms of morale but also in terms of substantial feedback. I think that would be helpful. So for me, even like meeting deadlines sometimes become a challenge. I have something that is, I can send it over, but I feel like this is not good enough. It does not really meet expectation on the other side. So I better ask for extension, work it, and yet it doesn't really. I'm for a context, I'm writing my dissertation, so a lot of like writing related challenges I'm dealing with these days, and I am realizing like actually it takes time to get a good product, and you just have to have more kind of contact. There's no magic way of like, I keep thinking, if I read this article on this topic, maybe it will give me the perspective that I need to make this paper really perfect. And then I do that, and then I came back to square where I started, where like, okay, now I have to write it. So now I'm realizing it's all about writing, get it, just type the words, spend more time writing, and accepting that has been a challenge for me, honestly. And I think so it's related to imposter syndrome, but also I guess that's also fed by the lack of support system for us to see, to bounce off ideas and drafts and build on that. So that's what I wanted to add.
Is the critical feedback loop. That's the whole process. It's like learning and getting feedback and making things better. That's actually the key. But it's not written, there's no caveat on the beginning of journal articles that says how long they took and how many drafts they took to write. And I think that's something we should include in all future publications.
Also, to expand on both Scott's discourse on the amount of publication that we're required to have, or for example, the CV, or Hone's comments about well, to be able to live up to a certain standard. there's a contradiction between the quality and the quantity, or the and at this stage of our lives, at least in my case, I'm tired of just doing things either for the sake of doing them or for getting a degree. Here we're here because we have a passion. We want to research something that we love. So of course, quality is something that I'm looking at more now, and it's more important also for me that I'm associated with work out there that is reflecting my abilities or my knowledge the best it can. So there's a contradiction between the amount of time, the depth of the engagement of being able to produce high quality work that we all want to, and the pressure to publish because we have to. So there's that challenge as well.
Yes, those are really excellent points. And thank you everyone for answering so truthfully and constructively. That was a great discussion. So we have about 15 minutes left. So I have two questions that we've kind of addressed throughout, and I'll kind of merge them together into whichever you would like to answer. So the first one is any advice you would like to impart to people who are thinking of coming into graduate school. And then the second one is just to reflect a little bit on the importance of our experience as public scholars, what we've learned in the last year, and if you are interested in continuing public scholarship as part of your research career. And I think what I'll do, so Galia, we'll go to you first if that's okay, and then we'll go around the table this way if that's all right. Are you okay with that, Galia?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, in terms of what I know that I'm supposed to talk about how I want to continue public scholarship, but what was the first question? I'm sorry.
It was just if you had any advice that you wanted to impart to incoming graduate students.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, as you can generally see from all of our experiences, we tend to we're veering towards what we like ultimately. Even in our research, we eventually kind of go back to investigating phenomena or looking at topics that are something we're interested in. So going into grad school, I think it's really important to remember that you're not just doing it to research things that are not like to your taste or to what you're interested in from when you from when you started seeing yourself in the future as a person who is to be a certain thing. If you have specific interests, that is something that you can integrate into your graduate school experience. So for me, perhaps at my initial experience, it was something like animal content online. It can definitely be something that is a phenomenon that makes you feel that you're passionate about or you want to learn more about. That is something that you can go into graduate school in order to kind of delve further into. So definitely don't go in thinking that it's going to be, if it's a pressure from someone or if it's a pressure from family, it doesn't have to be. It can become something that you are passionate about and something that you're looking forward to look into or to research. So aside from that, like we said, there's a lot of challenges that come with being in grad school, so that you have to bear that in mind going into it. It's not, like all fun and games. There is definitely some effort, like a lot of effort that needs to be put in and a lot of responsibilities that you bear. But like we said, in having a support system and people around you, you can definitely move forward. And in terms of public scholarship, I definitely want to continue in the sense that I would love to keep, making my work and my research, comprehensible to the public. I want to bear an impact with what I research to people who are maybe not in my field, but I would love for my research to be impactful to the public, and I would love to communicate that to the public. So by continuing to publish in the right media and by continuing to communicate myself on my social media towards the public, I want to continue to showcase what I'm finding and what I'm doing. Because without that, I feel that the contribution is limited to just my discipline and the people within my discipline. And that's not what I want. So I would hope to continue doing what I've been doing this past year. Some of it might be intimidating, doing public events and public speaking, but I would love to kind of keep the fuel in that so that I can see the contributions that I have tangibly and virtually, because everything is virtual. So including myself right now. So yeah, I mean, I definitely do want to continue being a public scholar, even though I'm not in that program, but like just in the future, I would like to continue communicating my research to the public.
That's wonderful. Yeah, and I totally agree with your points in terms of advice as well. And in terms of the public scholarship, we've heard quite a bit about some advice for incoming grad students. And public scholarship, I have found in terms of this program, has been extremely interesting in terms of training for especially for social media. So there's so many social media users, and none of us have gone through. We're kind of just trial and erroring our way through the use of social media and leveraging that as an important communication platform. So that's, I think, one of my biggest takeaways, and something that I will absolutely continue to do and explore and get better at, is communicating via these platforms that are really effective. Sorry.
Agreed. What advice I would give to anyone? Well, at this stage, when you are about to embark, or you're considering embarking into such a long journey, which is the PhD, hopefully one has some life experience, or has gone outside school and has encountered the things that either make one passionate about, or even worried about, concerns, things, curiosities, and so coming back to resolve ideas in one's head, coming back and having all this motivation from one's life, I think is important. So that's one advice. The other advice would be, and of course, to be passionate about this. I mean, it sounds cliche, but it's important, because the amount of effort and energy will require, will have to be fueled by the passion. And one other advice, which for I don't know if everyone here had this kind of thinking process, but for me it was to find the right person. Yes, I do have 3 supervisors, but it all started with that one, and I knocked several doors, and I spoke to many people before I felt the connection with this person, and a reassurance that it would be a relationship of support, mutual support, and then also give and take, and understanding, and also guidance. So to have that is important before one starts the PhD. And well, the public scholars, I think it brought me out of my shell. We tend to regress into a bubble of solitude and diving deep into the world of our studies. And I think it's necessary for us to emerge and make plainer what we do. Also for ourselves to question what we do in relation to the world. And I think more than just promoting oneself through, the public scholars, like finding the opportunity to promote oneself, is to forge these avenues. So it's a sort of it's a mutual, it's a give and take with the rest of the world, because we project, but we are also projected. We reflect, and we're reflected, and it's something that has given me momentum now to continue, also to see the various ways one can do this. And for me, one of the ways, are things like what we're doing right now, which it takes some organizing, but it's so efficient and it's very beneficial. Yes. So that's me.
Yeah, I think I agree with like the points that have been made about being passionate about your project, because it is not easy and you need an energy to fuel you. I think Ari said it beautifully. So that is important, and finding the right people. I would add to that, making decisions, lingering on issues is not a solution. I think there are certain things that we have to decide early on, be it about program-wise, supervised-wise, even university-wise. So well, I have learned a lot through the past 4 or 5 years about, making, observing and making decisions when it was the right time. That I think I would encourage, particularly for those those issues might cause severe consequence, such as not staying in the program and therefore you have to go back, leaving the country and all that. And I've seen that happening for people. So I think noticing those and fixing at it right away, I think would be one issue. Also, taking the project as yours. I think there was an expectation, at least now I see it differently, but initially, drawing a lot about, okay, I take this course will help me, or this event will help me. I think the PhD program, the degree is yours. You gotta decide. You have to drive it, and I think for certain people that are trained in a different model where the people in power or supervisors drive that, it might not be really clear right away. So one of the lessons I got is it's your PhD project. You get to decide how to drive it and where to take it, and you always have to reflect why you have to do it and how you want to do it. So I think taking ownership and be the driver in that relationship and that PhD project from the very beginning might make you productive, starting from deciding essays to write in relation to your dissertation topic and all that. So that is important, but also realizing maybe if you are considering a PhD program where the PhD stands vis-a-vis other life choices. We are human beings. PhD is not the only thing we want, so we have other preferences. What's the implication of that? I mean, yes, you might have support systems, but that can only go to a certain extent. And I think it's important to realize that they will face challenges if you have other ambitions. In my case, that was being vocal about what's happening in Ethiopia, writing, advocating, and all that. And I've reflected about that in my own blog recently for the program. But that, I think, in retrospect, I didn't realize how it would impact the PhD process and how it was not easy to give up one to have another, and we would be forced into those situations. So I think being reflective of or mindful of those kind of situations and not undermining the possible clash in priorities, I would say, would be important. Other than that, I think a number of opportunities exist in the university. Certainly the public scholar program, for me, it fits into my model of promoting justice and making whatever I do relevant outside the university. And this has been the case even in my earlier kind of academic trajectory. So it fitted into my own personal goal. And I think it certainly is something I will continue to do. And it was an opportunity, a wonderful opportunity for me to get trainings and experience of doing that in a way that nurtures this skill set. So yeah, I would definitely continue to do public scholarship, and I'm grateful for having this opportunity where we can experiment as a court with a support system from the university.
So I think I want to change the tone a little bit on that, because I think it's very easy to tell people like you need to have passion in what you're doing and you need to be like super into it and super enamored. And you're not wrong. Like it's 5 years, it's maybe 4, maybe it's 10. It's a period of time that is long, and passions change. And like saying like you need to be super passionate about your project, I think can lead to grad students getting into a trap where people define themselves by their research. And I think that's like the most critical thing you shouldn't be doing. Like you are not your research is part of you, but is not entirely you. Because grad school, academia, it's gonna be full of disappointment related to your research. And if you make your entire identity your research, you're going to become consistently on this emotional roller coaster of like, oh, someone liked my paper, oh, someone rejected my paper, oh, right? It's an endless thing. And so for me, I think it's important to be like, these topics, these themes are things that I care about, but not like the specificity of the project itself should be your passion. That's where I stand on that, because I think it's important to not define yourself by the project you're doing. And then the other bit of advice I always like to give is that the PhD, you have, at least in Canada, you have your coursework, and then it just opens up and you're alone. And you're maybe not alone, but you're at least free to kind of do whichever you want. And I tell everyone, treat your PhD like a job, right? However you want to work that job. I'm a 9-to-5 guy. I get up and I'm working from 9 to 5 most days, and part of those days is segmented specifically to my PhD. I have an allotment of hours each week that if I don't hit for my PhD, I'll stay up on the weekends and do it, because I'm on a timeline to get it done. And I think it's really important to be like, you're committing to the process of a PhD and treating it like a job so that you can stick on track. A lot of the students that I know who like start to fall behind on their timelines, they're either because they got a lot of rejections around what they were interested in, so their passion starts to fizzle out, or they haven't made that like, I'm going to work on my PhD X number of hours a week. And because of that, they are like, oh, I'll get to it in the summer. Oh, I'll get to it in the fall. Oh, I'll start the research in December. And it just keeps getting pushed back. And all of a sudden you're 7, 8, 9, 10. And there are obviously reasons to be delayed. And we don't need to be out of here in 3 years or 4 years or whatever timeline. But I think it's really important to keep those two pieces in mind. And then when it comes to public scholarship, I'm someone whose work is very much about public scholarship. I'm talking about disinformation, right? I'm actively talking about how do we counter false rhetoric, misleading content, and lies. So I will definitely be continuing to be engaging in public avenues and venues for my work, right? Whether it's introducing games in contexts and spaces like schools or libraries or community centers, or writing about the process of my work in blogs or journals or magazines. And I think those are really important for academics to be doing, especially if your research applies to the public, like broadly, because if you're doing work that's meant to impact the public, but the public can't access it, then you're not really addressing the goals that you're trying to address.
Yeah, so I wasn't going to offer any advice, but what Scott really said resonated with me, because I feel like as PhD students, we have so many competing priorities in our lives. So at the start, it's very important to set those kind of boundaries of how much you want. It's very easy for some people to let this take over their whole lives, and while for others who have, caretaking responsibilities or other things in there, like everyone does at one point or another, it's very important to set those kind of boundaries and define them not only for yourself, but also with the people you work with. And as for public scholarship, I have been a big social media person. That's how I started this, even before I officially became a public scholar and I did the trainings. And so social media for me, doing public scholarship was a way of giving back through my research to my own community who wanted this, who needed to benefit from it. And so that's how I started off in it. But one of the things that I've realized is that for me personally, public scholarship in religion carries a lot of risks with it. Religion is a very, very sensitive topic. Islam and the Muslim communities I deal with is an even more sensitive topic. And so for me, public scholarship, anyone wanting to do it should definitely do it, but not without the training. At least some training is very helpful in knowing how to kind of what kind of content you should put out there, the kind of language we should be using, what is being cognizant of our responsibility, not only to the communities, but to ourselves and our research as well. And then just also knowing when to stop engaging in it. Right? There's a point where you need to protect yourself also in public scholarship, especially in religion. So that was one of the things that has been very remarkable during my tenure, which I did not expect.
My one advice will be that when you're applying for a PhD or any program, research the institution where you're planning to go. Make sure that your values align with the values of the institution. And if they don't, you're not going to be happy. So make sure you do that work. I feel a lot of graduate students or a lot of people who are at that stage where they're thinking about universities and colleges are told, just apply everywhere, you get in somewhere. That's not the way to go. Make sure that you have researched the professors you want to work with, you research the institution, especially in this political climate. Make sure that your values and the values of the institutions are on the same page. Otherwise, you're going to find out very, very fast that you are not fitting in and you're not happy. So that's my first advice to anybody. As a public scholar, oh God, when I started my PhD program, my father once remarked in a casual conversation, "Oh, so now you're going to talk to us like we don't know something." And ouch, that was ouch. But I think it's important that we talk in a manner that is understandable, that I'm not talking down to others. And that has been an important part of public scholarship. You cannot make your research so complicated or academia so out of reach of the someone who's not here, that they do not have access to you. They still need to have that. That's a matter of care and respect for others, and that's the entire point of academia. So it has to be in a language that others can understand. It has to be in a language which my father and my mother can understand, though they do not read or understand English much, right? So that's what I took away from that program, and I'm very grateful for that kind of, bringing that back, bringing that more into my consciousness as I'm doing this. So I'll end on that.
Those are just wonderful remarks and a wonderful way to end our panel. So I just want to thank everyone so much. This has been the world's best cohort. We have had such a good year. We are BFFs, whether you want to be or not. I'm volunteering you as my BFFs, too bad. And it's been really wonderful to get to kind of wrap up our tenure with a discussion, with an open discussion, and to share our experiences. And it's just been really wonderful hearing from each of you and such diverse and really rich experiences that have brought us to this point. And I'd like to thank Fourth Space for facilitating this. This was the easiest thing to put together in the world because Fourth Space just did everything. It was amazing. Thank you so much. And I'd also like to thank the School of Graduate Studies, without whom we would not be here, and as well as UCS, University Communication Services, for advertising the event. And Concordia University, thanks for hosting us.
All right, thanks to everybody for coming in person and online. This was a bit of a throwback event with a lot of all-stars, Fourth Space all-stars. So yeah, it's good to have you all here again, and we're about to wrap up the Zoom. Thank you all so much for joining us. Have a nice day.